Sometimes I think people stay at a job too long because they think they couldn't do this without me. Well, if you're called somewhere else, calls to Jesus are permanent. Calls to local places are not.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Higher Purpose, a Vanderbloemen podcast. I am your host, Brett Connolly, and no Sarah Gonzalez this week, sad face, crying emoji, but we have a really good sub-guest stepping in. We called him in, pulling in the lefty from the bullpen. Our CEO and founder, William Vanderbloemen, will be joining us as we're talking about January, evaluating things. We just had Eugene on talking about New Year's resolutions, but it's that churning of should I stay, should I go? So enjoy the episode. Well, William, thank you so much for joining us. It's good to have you on the other side of the podcast, and coming over here for a bit. And, last week we had Eugene on and we were jump-starting the year and just talking about like New Year's resolutions. And it felt like a really appropriate time, January, to talk about, you talk about it so eloquently of like the holy crossroads. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just,
Yeah, well, it's what are we on right now? We're recording on the 7th, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so it's still hard to find a treadmill at the gym. And
that'll change.
Everyone's going to balance their checkbook. Everyone's going to get in shape. Everyone's going to read the Bible in a year until they get to Leviticus, and then a lot of people quit. But this is the time, I think, also when people are like, am I in the right job? Mm. And should I stay or should I go? Am I feeling a call that my season has come to a close, or did I have a bad burrito last night? I don't know. And so January's, historically, when over 17 years, I get a lot of calls from people saying, I don't know, man, but something's different and I'm feeling it. And I've tried to think through that a whole lot and trying to say, well, what have I learned in listening to people with that conversation for a while? And the main conclusion that I've come to is, anytime you transition jobs, it is a real holy crossroads. If you're gonna live out your life in a way that says, I'm not just, another day older and deeper in debt. It's not that. I actually want to make my life matter. I want to do a career that I'm good at, that can leave the world better than I found it. That needs to be a journey of continual progression. Mm-hmm. And anytime I see people making a change, it's just a holy crossroads. Frankly, interview hack, and you probably do this too, but having interviewed, I don't even know how many tens of thousands of candidates, I probably pay more attention to their job transitions than anything else. Yeah. How did they handle it? Why did they leave? Where did they go? Was it a move up or down or sideways or, those kind of things? It's hard to overstate how tender or holy a moment it is when you're really thinking, should I stay or should I go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and listeners, you're maybe in an internship or a residency program, or you're just into that first full-time job, or maybe you're in your first full-time job and you're climbing the ladder a little bit. You're going, I see how the sausage is made. Maybe I don't like this. This isn't what I thought this degree was. And just kind of keeping that our North Star, right? Or like being a good steward of this one life that we have been given. I feel like we could talk about staying too long, leaving too quickly. So let's kind of start with the evaluating leaving too quickly. Is this a bad burrito?
Right.
Kind of
right.
That Monday blues kind of thing.
Yeah, well, so several things. Am I leaving too soon? I think most people do. Now, the world has changed a lot. I am so old that when I grew up, I say this in conferences with people my age or around it, I'll say, how many of you are old enough to say your favorite time of the entire week was Saturday mornings? And the people around my age and up raise their hands and say, well, why is that? And I said, why is that? And the whole group all say at the same time, that's when the cartoons were on.
Yeah.
We had one day to do that, one set of channels, one morning. You ask a Gen Z, when are the cartoons on? It's like
Whenever I want.
'em, or whenever I want to create one.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I think
yeah.
it's a whole
Yeah.
different sort of like an on-demand life. And there was a time where there were only 3 networks, and then Fox came along. Maybe you had PBS. There was a time when people worked one job for 35 years and retired with the gold watch. I mean, that was a real thing. That day for now is over. Maybe it comes back. So there has been just a shift in the way the world works, where there's more of an on-demand. I can shift and change. We saw it in millennials. I guess they're kind of geriatric now, but you're not a geriatric.
I have tendonitis in my knee, so I'm getting there. I'm getting there, William.
Can you feel it when a front's coming
It
through?
does.
That?
I know.
Okay,
I know
good,
when the cold
good,
front's on its
good.
way. That's
I think people are moving around more than they did before, and that's not
true.
necessarily good or bad, but I am seeing people bail too early.
yeah.
And there are a couple reasons. I mean, maybe the number one reason is they have a hard time dealing with their manager. The number one reason people join a company is for the cause and where the company's going. The number one reason people leave a job is a bad manager. But it's not always bad manager. Particularly having a bunch of kids that are Gen Z, and I watched them going into the workplace. And and I'm not making any judgments here. My phone's in my pocket. I did turn it on Do Not Disturb, so it is an appendage. I'm not the old dude who just has one of those things that's plugged into the wall to talk on the phone. No, I understand, but I think as I've watched this generation come up, which I'm very excited about, it is an appendage, and the screen is the way we connect, and we, Snapchat people that are across the room. I've seen my kids do it to each other rather than talk. And then when you get in the workforce and you're in a multi-generational setting, there are 5 generations in the workforce now. That's the first time it's ever happened in the U.S. economy. And you're talking to people, you have to do human interaction.
That's right.
And I've got, one kid who's like, that's just so much energy. I'm like, well, that's going to be your life unless you want to be like an actuary who sits in a room by themselves with a math problem all day. So I think there's just a lot of contributing factors why people might leave a little too early. And, I think my number one advice would be, if you're supposed to leave, if it's really a deep, purpose-driven calling that has you thinking about leaving, it's not going to go away in a day. Problems will go away in a day, but it's not going to go away in a day if it's a real sense of completion and those sorts of things. So I just encourage people, take your time. I know we have some people that listen to this or watch, see, here I go being old again, watch this podcast, and they're saying, I don't know about ministry. Should I leave? Let me just tell you something. If you're saying that on Monday, don't call me. The number of people that used to reach out to us, I don't know the stats now, but used to be there were more people that reach out to us saying, I think my season has come to a close. They do that on Monday than all other 6 days combined. And it's just, ministry's hard. And if you go, bust your tail at a job on Sunday and you have a dad or a mom chew you out because you wore a shirt that was too bright a color, or you let the kids out 5 minutes late, and so now we're behind the Baptists in line at the, cafeteria or wherever you go.
That's right.
Are you kidding me? And you get to Monday, and you've left all your energy on the stage on Sunday, and you're down. So there's if it's Monday and you're thinking of quitting in ministry, or better put, if you're in a highly emotional state, and you're not in danger, if you've been harassed, if you've been abused, and you're emotional about it, quit. Right, but if this is just trauma that is human emotional stuff, I would wait till that goes away and let the water settle. When the water's stirred up, you can't see anything, and you want clear vision before you make that decision to leave.
That's good. Yeah, and conflict's going to happen, right? When you have more than one person, sometimes you have internal conflict with just one person. We talk about compound interest, positively, negatively. That can happen on a resume as well. If you have a short stint and you have conflict and you leave to go to the next green hill, well, if that happens 3-4 times in a row, that resume starts looking real ugly, and it's hard to spin it. It's hard to tell that story. And there's that element of, maybe I have some growing up to do. Maybe I need to do some research as to how to best deal with conflict.
I think it's the hardest time in my career was early. And I think it's probably harder for you early and probably harder for people younger than you early. Well, why do I say that? Early in my career, I had this amazing, I knew everything because I was young. And so I knew everything. And I'd go work with people that were older. It's like, oh, this is, and I'd have to do stuff that was beneath my training or whatever. And that is kind of like you were saying, it's that early part of the career. I think it's harder for the younger you go down, the more you're working with multiple generations. Yeah. You've got, my father-in-law is one of the smartest people I know in the world, and he still does everything on a legal pad. Like somebody's working with legal pad guy today, and they're like, can you not just send an email or a text? Right. Or, So it's just hard, that first part, particularly when you're not doing what you think you're wired to do. The bottom of the ladder really is the bottom of the ladder, even if you are smarter and higher tech and that sort of thing. Now, if you're older and you're listening to this saying, I want to get in touch with what the younger generation's thinking, you need to reach down and tap into them and give them some authority, because they probably are smarter than you in a lot of ways, at least in the tech way. So it's just really tricky because you got a whole generation that's grown up. My youngest kids know how to use AI to do stuff that I don't know how, so they're quicker than I am. But they're in a low part of their career where there's just going to be some natural frustration, and I'm afraid that sometimes that leads people to say, I'm in the wrong job, I'm going to change.
Right.
And once doesn't hurt, twice doesn't hurt, but here's the thing, this cuts a lot of different ways. I'm going to come back to it in a little while, but there's power in patterns. Did you go to a job and it wasn't what you thought? I mean, not to get all biblical, but like we say all the time, our job here when we're helping candidates talk about a job they might look at, or employers talk about a candidate, our job is to make sure nobody walks down the aisle with Rachel and then wakes up next to Leah.
That's right.
That's not what they said it was. And, and then it's 7 years. I got to wait to get to what.
That's right. Yeah.
So, that happens. And if you have to leave over that, that's fine. Singular events should not make lifetime decisions, with the exception of some really hard singular events, criminal singular events. Right. But patterns are worth paying attention to. And when your resume starts to have a pattern of, they stay about 2 years and then they move on. They stay about 2 years and then they move on. They stay about wow, I just keep working for the wrong people.
6 times in a row.
Yeah. What is the common denominator here? So, don't worry if you have to leave once, but man, every time you leave, just realize the next time you leave after that, it's going to be looked at all the more closely.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, and talking about kind of the other side of, am I staying on too long? Am I kind of being the good soldier? Or have I lost my fastball? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, there are so many different ways to approach this. We could approach it from, I'm one time I was interviewing a wonderful gentleman who was a worship leader at his church, and he was telling me how he thought he only had about 10 more years left, and he was 79 years old. And the church was trying to go younger with their worship. I'm like, I don't know how to tell you this, that I don't think the audience that's listening is like end of career, how much gas do I have left in the tank?
Sure.
I think there are times where people stay too long, believing that something will change when it won't. And you see this in ministry a lot. I was guilty of this in ministry where, Jesus reached down, pulled me out of a ditch, and that I could never, ever deserve. And that's a whole nother show that's probably not, appropriate for all audiences. And I somewhere in my youth thought, I need to do the same thing for others. So I'd end up in managerial relationships or relationships where I'm trying to save and change somebody or some organization that's not going to change. And that's where you get back to, is this a singular event or is it a pattern? If you've got a boss that is a jerk and has been a jerk and keeps chewing through staff, you're probably not just going to change him with a smile.
Right.
And that takes careful looking. But there are some people out there who, because they've been saved when they shouldn't, think others, I need to save them when they won't want to be saved. Jesus always led with, do you want to be made well? And sometimes I think, particularly in ministry jobs, I see people just take a beating and stay because they think they can change the situation. It doesn't always work that way.
Yeah. And sometimes that leads to burnout.
Sometimes it leads to burnout. And sometimes, let me tell you a story. When I left church in Montgomery, we just built a building. Things were going awesome. And First Pres Houston called me, and I felt really bad about leaving this church. They'd been good to me, but this was clearly a call. We could spend a whole episode on it. I clearly knew I was supposed to go to First Pres Houston. And I sat down with my best buddy, who was an elder. We were both just kids. I mean, I was 31 when I came to Houston. And I said, John, I feel called to First Pres Houston. They've called me, and here are the reasons why, and the discernment I've gone through. And it's not just because it's a big church. And I think I need to go there, and I'm really sorry. And he looked at me and he said, you know what, William, if you're the right guy for Houston, you're no longer the right guy for here.
That's right.
And sometimes I think people stay at a job too long because they think they couldn't do this without me. Well, if you're called somewhere else, calls to Jesus are permanent. Calls to local places are not. When you think about, it's amazing to me to try and look at where Jesus got into trouble. Because I got in trouble a lot growing up. I was not, citizen of the year or anything. And I'm like, well, I got in trouble. What did he get in trouble for? He got in trouble with the religious authorities for all kinds of things, healing on the set. But what did he get in trouble with his friends for? That really tells you something about character. You say, why do I get in trouble with my friends? Best I can tell, Jesus' friends, his disciples, he got in trouble with them. He's like, where is he going? We just got here. He keeps moving from town to town. Where'd he go? Did we lose him? Is he off somewhere? Where'd he go? He's on the water. Where's he? He's always moving from town to town and village to village, preaching, teaching, and healing. And so on the one hand, you don't want to just be skittish or fickle with your career and leave too soon. But on the other hand, I don't know that everybody's called to stay in the same place at the same time. And when you start feeling like maybe it's time to go, it may be God kind of in a passive voice saying to you, you've finished what I asked you to do here.
Yeah.
And you're no longer the right person for here. It's time for the next person.
Yeah, and we oftentimes, churches or organizations will be like, what got us to where we are isn't going to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah. It's that great book. I keep it where I can see the title in my room. What got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
And that can be misused and abused talking about people, but it can be true for me. I need to ask myself, am I still the right guy for this?
Sure. And as I've led different teams, one of the things that I've seen a distinction of, like, am I holding on too long? Is it time for me to transition off? Is some people's love language is sarcasm, and I think the generation's sarcasm is getting used more and more. It's when sarcasm becomes cynicism.
Yeah.
That's it's a fine line, and they're related to one another. But when the sarcasm becomes cynicism, that's usually a flag for me, where it's like, okay, maybe it's time for this person to transition off, and how do we help that person?
One of the hardest criticisms I ever got. I'm interrupting you. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Knock knock.
He was there.
Interrupting cow.
Interrupting cow.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry. I'm a full-time dad. Be here all week. So one of the hardest criticisms I got in preaching was, William, I love people that make me laugh. I just that is a quick way to be friends with me. If you can make me smile and laugh, and I always like to have a couple of fun lines in a message or whatever. Yeah. And I had an elder pull me aside one time, and he was a little older than me, and I didn't receive this very well. But he said, "If you couldn't use humor, would you have anything to say?" Wow, that hurt when he said it. But as I dropped back and thought, I think I might be using this as a crutch. I see it in the workplace a lot. That doesn't mean don't make jokes and don't be laughing, but if it's my wife says, it's only a funny joke if everybody can laugh. That makes for very few jokes.
That's true. Yeah.
When the jokes are not fitting that definition and they're a crutch for not having anything else to say, that's it might be time for you to kind of remove yourself from the equation.
Very good. No, and I really appreciated you sharing a little bit about your story. I always think those are lessons learned, not just hey, here's this and here's 3 points, but it's like, man, what are the things that you tripped up on, you skinned your knee on?
Let me pay the stupid tax for you. Like, just maybe you won't believe it, but hopefully it'll help a little bit.
That's
There's
right.
no reason for both of us to make the same mistakes.
That's right. That's right. Man, and you talked about have I completed the calling? I think that's an important piece and a distinction of not just church jobs, right? I mean, the Lord's placed things on everyone's lives, and I'm thankful for the diversity of the body. If we were all pastors, this would be a boring and strange world. So I'm thankful there are doctors and teachers, but it's coming to have I completed my task? And I think sometimes we have, I'm thankful for like books like how to become a unicorn, where you take this assessment and here's your strengths and here's your areas of growth. But you have those loyalists that stick around because they think they're the only ones that can help. They think they're the only ones that you say, hey, are you developing someone, or is that even a part of my job? But talking about the fulfilling the calling piece, I think is an important distinction. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well,
lane?
so there's so many dimensions to this that I have wrestled through in my life when I think through, I think when I'm tempted to leave too soon, I have to say, have I completed what I was called to do here? A great example would be mile 20 of a marathon. You get to mile 20 of a marathon, you're ready to quit. But did I complete what I was asked to do? If you're leaving before you've completed what you were asked to do, then you got a lot of other sub-questions to ask. Is this because I can't get there because of management? Is this because, there may be valid reasons for that. But sometimes people leave without completing what they're supposed to get done. I told First Pres Houston, one of the few wise things that God gave me when they came calling, we were getting ready to start another building campaign. And here I am, this young kid they should or shouldn't have been interviewing, probably should have hired a search firm, but there weren't those back then. And I just said to them, look, guys, the shovel goes in the ground November 12th. I can't go anywhere after that because I'll have a new chapter in my assignment, and I got to see them through that building. So I'm not trying to rush you or sound like a snotty 31-year-old, but I got to have an answer one way or the other by the 11th, or I know what my answer is on the 12th. And they respected that. And so it's like, are you at completion in your chapter of what you're trying to do, right? Here's one great way to know, and this doesn't just speak to church. If you left today, is there someone you've trained who could come do your job? Jack Welch, the old head of GE, when it was a big conglomerate company, kind of what begat the 30 Rock show, that's the old show. He used to have a rule: you could not get promoted until you had trained your replacement. And that's a really interesting way to think about whether you're ministry or work. If I left today, am I leaving them shorthanded? Or have I trained up someone so that they're not going to be crippled when I leave? That's a really good way to just tangibly explore, have I completed what I was called to do here? And of course, there's always prayer and there's all these other things. But just as a tactile question, it might be worth considering.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the theme, should I stay, should I go? I even had someone text me today saying, hey, do you have contact of someone who's a life coach or a career coach? It is happening. It's the start of the year. People are assessing. People are evaluating.
It's happening in a bigger pattern than that, Brett. Back in December of 2020,
it was a good year.
October of 2020, excuse me. All of a sudden, I was getting all these calls that sounded just like the calls I get in January. Life coach, I'm going to get on a treadmill. I'm thinking my time's coming to a close. I'm like, why in October? Aren't you supposed to be getting ready for Christmas? We're finally sort of coming out of the pandemic. We were ready to deal with all the Transformers, the Omicron, Deltacron, Megatron, whatever, all those. But what in the world? So we started studying. We realized a lot of people, as we would have said when I was in Alabama, a lot of people are fixing to resign.
Yeah.
And we wrote about it and sort of called it. And it became what's known as the Great Resignation. Well, that happened somewhere between 3 and 4 years ago, depending on when you move. There's enormous churn. And so now people are getting to, usually year 3 is when whatever fun was happening at work wears off and you get to the real. And you get into year 3 or 4 and you're like, should I stay or should I go? But man, when I moved last time, it was hard. But so it's not just it's January. We're in a larger cycle where if you've been feeling that way, you're like, dude, I've been feeling this way since November. This is in January. You're not alone. Very, very normal thing right now. And it's because of this sort of once in, hopefully, a lifetime or lifetimes that we have this shutdown that led to a lot of very different reasons for people to have this great resignation. And now we all took new jobs 3 or 4 years ago, and lo and behold, there are a lot of people wondering, is it time to go now?
Right. Right. Absolutely. And I'm sure everyone's listening going, oh my gosh, we just talked about COVID again. I'm so tired of talking about COVID. But it's the ripple effect, right?
It's a long ripple.
It's still
long
going.
ripple.
It's still
Yeah.
prevalent on both sides of
Yeah.
client and candidate.
Do you know the dog shelters are full right now?
Is that true?
Overpopulated.
Really?
Remember how hard it was to get a dog 4 years ago, 5 years ago?
Oh, yeah. Now you can get
Now people
4
are
or
like,
5.
I don't know that I wanted to sign up for that. And I'd probably
Buy
need
2,
to-
get 1 free kind of deals, a little
Exactly.
bundle.
Things move in cycles.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, very good. Is there any kind of closing thoughts? We talked about, a little bit of your story, and we asked this question to everyone that hops on the podcast of,
Yeah.
what do you know now that you wish you would have known then?
Yeah, that I don't know everything. I wish I would have asked more questions. I knew it all. I mean, my favorite, you probably might have even said it on this podcast before, but my favorite quote from an old guy, Ted Turner, who was just a big old personality. He said, if I had a little more humility, I'd be perfect. And that was me.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
yeah.
still me. I hope not. But I think that's part of it. One thing that I realized a few years after we started this company, and we were fortunate enough to have some really good success, I was able to look back and somebody said, well, how in the world did you decide to do that? And I said, I'm not real sure how I ended up here. It was a pretty, crooked line. But I'll tell you this, I could never do the job I'm doing now had I not done all the jobs leading up till now.
That's good. Yeah.
And then just to unpack that in just a few minutes, like there's no way I could figure out what the theological operating system of a church is had I not gone to seminary. I use my
Yeah.
seminary degree more now than I did in a church.
I believe
Because
it.
there's so
Yeah.
much, every single client is unique, every single church, every candidate, all unique. Okay, yes, I could never do search right now had I not done some work at a large oil and gas company in an HR setting where I learned some of how all that works. I mean, I could never have done a startup had I not done kind of the chronic entrepreneuring that I did from about age 8 all the way through college. So if you can find a job, if you're looking at that next thing, don't just look at the green pasture, right?
Yeah.
And can I go down a little side road?
Please.
If you're looking at a job and you love the mission of the company, I would never have known this younger, but I would spend a lot of time stalking whoever it is you're going to work for. I wouldn't let them know you're stalking, but your number one reason you're going to leave that job is the manager, not the cause. So make sure, do they have high turnover? Is it all the time turnover? Why is that? What's the problem, right? So if you can look at a job and the manager's probably somebody I could work with and it's a cause I want to be a part of, a fun question that I'm learning to ask myself and tell people others to ask is, the best job to take is the one you never could have taken had you not done all the jobs leading up till now.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean bigger and higher pay. It doesn't mean, you can get to a place where you get to follow just a passion. But if you can find a job that employs everything you've learned up till now, that's a progression of your vocation. That's a lot different than a promotion. A progression of what you feel down in here you are called to do with your life. That's going to give you far more joy and satisfaction here, and I think it's got pretty great eternal retirement benefits, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah. And the longevity. And truth be told, when I first interviewed with Vanderbloemen, I purchased and read Culture Wins. I crept on the website. It's like those little research elements, one, helps you stand out as a candidate, being able to we'll lob those in every now and then. I saw this as your core values, but it also helps an individual figure out, do those core values line up with my core values?
Yeah.
Pretty early on. And if it doesn't,
That's
that's
okay.
okay. Better learn it then
Yes.
than 6 months into the job.
Or 6 years into being married to Leah instead of Rachel.
Yeah, that's
Smart people are not all designed to work together.
Yeah.
You can be a good, smart person that loves Jesus and not be a fit somewhere else with good, smart people that love you. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Very good. Now, well, thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
On the other podcasts. It's good to have the founder and CEO in the podcast room, the house. Thank you for bringing
Absolutely.
some of your brilliance and thoughts into this space. And I hope this group of young leaders that are listening to this are able to kind of pull some nuggets and find helpful things for them as they're evaluating what does 2025 look like and moving forward.
Well, and let me just say, if you're watching today and you're thinking of should I stay or should I go, you're not alone. And there's nothing wrong with you for that. And I just hope you will find something in today's message that either makes you ask the right question or start to explore a little differently. So you treat that as a holy crossroads and not just, I hate my job, I got to go work somewhere else. Because I think if you'll treat it as the former and not the latter, it'll be a far more meaningful experience. And hopefully you're not watching this podcast because you just want to get through life. You're watching it because you want a higher purpose. And that's to be applauded, but it's also a pretty humbling thing that needs to be tended to with great care. So if we can help you in any way, we're pulling for you and we're here for you.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of A Higher Purpose of Vanderbloemen podcast. If you're still listening, if you made it to the very end of a podcast, which I never do, I just want to say that you're the best. Thanks for listening. And we'd love to connect with you further. Like our stuff, follow us, smash that subscribe button. We're on all the socials. It was a really good episode just talking with our CEO and founder, William Vanderbloemen, of is it time to look at other opportunities? Should I stay or should I go? You can take a look at our growing library of podcasts all at ahigherpurposepodcast.com, and we'll see you next week.